conceived the work, made the work, hung the work, now you've got to talk about the work.
Well, there were so many stops and starts, I kept getting sick. and
Yeah.
saying, now I've got flu, now I've got COVID. And he would write back and say, it never rains till it pours. And I was saying, I think I've got over something to show, but blah, blah, blah. We got through it.
Yeah, sometimes under pressure for deadline or, sure,
But the COVID one was fine because I was only a bit sick from here at all. And I walked from my house to my studio and vice versa and didn't see anybody. So it wasn't too bad.
What's the answer there, right? So just, I don't want today to be not a downer, but to try and put into words. For me to interpret this work would definitely be a downer because the work. This is not about explaining the work, because for me, this is work that you feel. And I think, when you come into the gallery and experience this work, maybe the best reaction, the more appropriate reaction is a gasp, physical reaction, and or a sharp intake of the breath, such as the, I suppose, effect of this work and the work of Fergus is on me and on the viewer. I have a few kind of maybe routes in or ways into kind of thinking about the work that I want to kind of run past Fergus. Fergus, I hope, will also then have his own ideas, and then maybe we can walk around and look up close at the work. But maybe just to kick it off, I just said no words can do justice to what we have here before us. In fact, the right response to this work might be a gasp or a shock into the breath as your body feels this work and your eyes blink to your soul. You said in an interview, with Brian McCavera in the Irish Arts Review, Fergus, after he was asking about the influence maybe of design, because when you saw your work, you were thinking about design, interior design. I just felt you were going the wrong line of questioning. And you spoke about living in Milan and fashion. You lived there for 10 years and just being excited about fashion and design. But you just responded to, I think you said this morning, you ignored a lot of his questions and just answered with ideas of your own. And you said, in history, the great love of painting for me is Giotto. And you can't get more pared down than his forms and his colours. And you can't separate that from his humanity. I try to distill everything in my work. I love feelings of density and intensity. I love when something feels almost unbearable. This unbearable intensity and instinctual nature of your work is what I think I feel when I look at your work, Ferguson. That gasp of breath. Is that the human? Is that the humanity that you meant when you talk or think about Giotto? And
I can go back on a couple of things. Giotto is, I was thinking actually during the making of this work, and I was dying with flu and the COVID and all that stuff. Your body is low, so your whole mood is low and everything. And I was thinking when I get stuck, and stuck means that I don't seem to be moving in any exciting direction. There are two books I opened. One is a well-worn book of Giotto's frescoes in the Scrovegni Chapel in Padua. And it's like a balm. It's these wonderful voluminous forms, and I find his faces, everything about his painting, but these forms of the cloaked figures move to tears. I find strangely the humanity is in that more than the agony of people's faces or whatever. And the other word you used there was distill. And I think there's no avoiding absorbing and distilling. Well, I think in my case, you absorb everything. I mean, you mentioned fashion there. Fashion is exciting. At your side, everything is exciting. I'm just blown away by practically every experience every day. And things can be, there's nothing that's ordinary. I mean, obviously we go through our days and loads of things pass us by. But I think often, before you know it, you can consume or take it in, a lot of sensation. And without knowing how or why it comes out. And as I get older, I'm seeing how life's events affect me, and in many ways, the shapes and the rotations and the mood here comes from a specific issue to do with me, which is my eyesight, and which has imaginative consequences as well as plenty of practical ones, such as not falling downstairs and things like that. I don't have sight in this eye, and this eye is a problem as well. So the eye and my mood, and the way I think I'm absorbing, or feel I'm absorbing, sometimes seems like it dies, and that's a disappointing time for me. I think, oh, I'm stuck. And I was on my ancient computer in my studio, which is about to die, and the thing about that being a problem is that it contains a really baby's version of Photoshop, which I can use. It's an early version, and I asked the person who gave it to me, I didn't buy it, will I transfer that to my super duper new computer when I get one? And he said no. And on my in-between computer, I have the new Photoshop that I rented, and it does my head in. I can just go crazy. So I go back to my old one, and making shapes, it's a good way for me to make shapes and look at things before I start turning the shapes into paper or card or models or something more physical. Because for me, this simple Photoshop that I could use is like cutting colored paper. And it suits very well the geometric forms. And I was looking at these shapes on my computer. I know that paperwork, paint on paper, wasn't doing anything for me. And I went to the computer and I just started playing with colours and shapes. And then this is a most simple eureka moment. I mean, it's unbelievably simple. I rotated the shape. I found response. And I then rotated again and again. I thought, oh yummy, this is doing something. And so I straight away then went to make the paper or cardboard or physical models. Because the computer, I love it. I love it. It's where I mostly start. Even if my efforts are very primitive, it's where I start. And then I try to make colours I've seen, which of course are coming out in terms of light. I try to make them into the kind of colour I want, which is actually the opposite, which is completely opaque. And that's a great starting moment. So this little mini eureka moment set me on a track. And I think these small paintings here were the first one. I did a number of those in different colours. We showed this one, so I think I was getting very dark. Everything was getting very dark. And there was one day I felt I need something like light or even brightness. So these paintings began as studies for the larger paintings, and then they became, I was very happy with them in themselves at that scale. So then I was to plan a new scale, and I came up with the scale of the painting that's called War in the Entrance. And I began painting that series in this colour, but it didn't do anything for me yet. It's still hanging around. I knew I needed to go to a darker, heavier colour, and that's what I went to my default colour, which is burnt umber. Just on that painting, by the way, the making of the shapes and looking at them in my studio and changing the position and wondering what to do next made me think of. I couldn't think what painting it was. It made me think of 15th century Italian battle paintings. I thought they were going this way and that way and this way and that way, and I kept thinking of clumps of figures, soldiers with shields and spears, and I couldn't get that out of my head. And I didn't know which painting I was even thinking of. There was gnawing away at me. And then I began just to look up, type in what you're looking for. And I found, in fact, I think the very painting was Paolo Uccello's, one of the panels for the Battle of San Romano. By the way, there's two here because one of the printouts is on glossy paper and it's not so nice. It's much nicer on this paper. When I saw this, I thought, I wasn't thinking of a war painting. But this came to me after, and it somehow completed it for me. It also tied in with the fact that some days when I left the studio, I felt a sense of doom. And actually I went home quite down, thinking, what's going on? This is doom. Well, I went to the studio maybe the next morning and the colour was going boom, boom, boom. I felt if it's a heartbeat was beating, if the heart was beating, I would go on. And actually, these paintings, I use tape a lot because I love that severe straight line to keep things in and also to let things out. And the painting is never finished for me until I take the paint and the surrounding paper that's protecting the white off. That's when you discover it could be wrong. You're looking at a wonderful colour, you take a, oh, that doesn't work, so you start over. But I was very, what's the word? I was just curious why I'm feeling doom, and it affected my mood. Then the next stage was thinking of war, and I think some days I was thinking of the world we're in at the moment, and there's a lot of fears. I cannot say it's a literal depiction, it's not, but this came to me after. I think when you're responding to what you've absorbed, what you as an artist, as an individual artist do comes out, and that's just the way of it. Actually, just a very practical note on the tape is, if this is interesting, I now paint on aluminium, whereas I used to paint on canvas, and that comes purely from my eye situation, because those straight lines are so important to me that when I used to tape onto canvas and paint onto canvas, there was a slight bounce, and I was going, I wasn't happy. So I began to find harder surfaces. I tried different woods, and then I tried aluminium. And the day the aluminium panels came into my studio, I knew I wanted to lie down on them because they were heaven. They feel like heaven, and they actually feel to me like I'm painting on milk. I can't explain it. I start painting on them, I think it's not absorbing like paper would, but it's staying so, but it drinks it in. And it's an example of where a need, something that was necessary for me, has just become a pure joy. And I also was walking through the streets of New York with my great painter friend, a woman called Susan Sugar, and I said, I can't see that neutral masking tape anymore. I wish there was coloured masking tape. And she brought me to Blick's art store where there was yellow and red, and I now use their yellow. And actually when the paintings are all wrapped up, they look like something from IKEA, because they're yellow, and that's that colour I think of IKEA. But it's magic, you know. It's a joy to work with, and it just answers all your needs. Cue for next question. If there is one,
yeah. Look, you're talking this kind of process, Fergus. The art historian maybe in you is trying to piece together, maybe do that after revolution or something. But my first response when I saw the word was a feeling of rotation.
yes,
Something involving a revolution, and it reminds me of steel. I suppose first of all, looking the other day with the opposite here, thinking I love the reference to square. I mean, because your work is, it's a reference to square, a circle, a triangle, of those three kind of key forms. But I just when I look at them, I'm thinking of it once had been a square or a departure from a square, but it's also something going in another direction. And I'm reminded of this, the roll, it reminded me of steel, and this kind of feeling of movement, even in steel, on the piers of the new entrance to Imma, because I know how the trouble you went through in making that, to have it positioned just right, to have it, it's this very minimal barrel or drum polished, mirror polished stainless steel, drum shape that is just tipped forward on the pier to give the impression of feeling, again, of feeling its mutual feeling of movement, and again, come back to something instinctual, I suppose, and truthful in your work. But in your description again in the Irish Arts Review article, you talked about how when you maybe looked at that commission, you said that you're always either on the way up or the way down. So it was kind of repeating or referencing that the site and the architecture literally in the scroll or the roll in the broken pediment over the entrance. So, but then you described it as because you can't see the full building, you couldn't see the detail of the building. You wanted this column to have a feeling of infinity, or this broken column. So anyway, I love all those different references and thinking that you've gone through in making those works. And I find a similar kind of sense of dynamic in these works.
Well, the sculptor Steele, if anyone doesn't know, was a sculptor on the entrance to the Imma, and it's gone now, lorry crash into it. But the intention there was something that would go on forever, and I was very much affected by the fact you always walk up or you walk down out of the Museum of Modern Art. And very much so, when I would look up at the building, you didn't see where the building ended because the trees were in the way. So I just thought I wanted something that implied it was going on forever. There's a connection here because these pieces, you could keep, in a way, you could keep adding to them, or they could, I like the idea that they could keep spinning, or could keep turning, or there's plenty of alternatives of arrangements. And they also became, for me, in my studio, because many of the studies had many, many different colours, they became like a puzzle. I honestly one day thought, this is a conundrum, I have no idea how to get out of it. And because it was like almost playing with toys. I had cut out the shapes in different materials to make the studies. And in fact, when I went to the fabricator of this piece, I said they're all going to be different bright colours. When they came back to my studio, I said, oh, this looks dark. And I just thought, these pieces are dark. And I had to make them dark because I saw their physical selves and I touched them. And they just felt dark. And this colour is a colour I like to use quite a lot. It's cobalt blue and burnt umber. And I've used it before, and this took a good many coats because this for me was a painting I could see every day without having to wait to take the masking paper and take off. I could see it happening. And I would see it one day and I thought there was too much blue, there was too much of the burnt umber. And I was pushing and pushing like this until I found a mixture that worked. And until the mixture for me then ceased to be a colour, I just felt it's a shadow. And when I knew it was a shadow and I thought I would walk through that shadow and disappear, I thought that's right, I'm happy with that. So that's where the final coat for this final recipe I put together of that colour.
And the rotations, Fergus,
the rotation,
this composition is repeated before.
Yes, it is. It's a rotation I found very satisfying for me.
Maybe tell us how you kind of went through the decision making and the process of kind of finalizing on this.
It's only trial and error and seeing which one worked. And in fact, I noticed I repeated everywhere.
Yeah.
Because this exhibition work isn't finished and I'm continuing on these, I sometimes expect to see different formations. I don't know, because I'm just working on them now. Also with this the fabricator asked me what kind of backing, what do you call it, square section piece as a backing, and I rely on what's ready made, and he showed me the examples, and that's the 40mm one, and I thought that's good. I wanted it to feel solid, and sometimes when I look at it from the side I think it's like tombstone slabs, and I call this smoke because I've been making colours recently that make me think of burning things. And I one day went into my studio, and in fact, especially coming in here some days, I thought I was walking through a bonfire. Because I have very often, I notice in work, childhood memories come back. I mean, and childhood was quite a long time ago. And I had a distinct feeling of this bluey smoke from my grandmother's bonfire in her garden. And I couldn't get rid of it. I've come in here sometimes and I keep getting the same bonfire smell. So these things, that's where I think you've taken in things all your life, things you've seen, things you've experienced, and they will come out. And they will come out when you have a focus and a need to push them out.
So most of the time you said what paintings were in, when you were making the painting, that paintings were in control.
Oh, I thought they took charge. So I was on the floor one day and I looked up and I said, what are you telling me now? I mean, that sounds crazy, but it was quite like that. I felt some kind of imp, some magic thing came into my studio and was moving things around. In fact, that really sounds like Tommy Rock. But it was at play and it was exciting me, but I felt I was surrendering to it. And I had never felt that before. Or maybe we are doing that all the time when we work without actually naming it. That certainly was a factor. And something happened the other day, I can tell this, we took down the painting more and we put it back up. And it took us countable seconds to realise we put it back up in the wrong order. And I realised, oh, that's very exciting. Because I thought, that is the puzzle at work. It was in my studio, this was acting like a puzzle that I couldn't find my way out of sometimes. I thought, we have succumbed to the puzzle. We put the piece up without realising we put it up in the wrong way. And I found it quite exciting, actually. We have to do it like the right way, of course.
Something that comes up at Fergus as well, and maybe relate to something. But that started, remember you telling me that first came into the gallery in 09 as a piece called Hoops. Involved the show. We talk more about the show, but I just love how something so ordinary, incidental, like the ring of the push pedal bin in your studio, led to something so.
Because they're so beautiful.
Yeah.
She's not the push pedal bin, it's
That
has a ring on the ground floor. Oh, yeah. 3 or 4 spines and a ring at the top, and you can sit your plastic bag in. I love those. And it's not even a question of being absolutely loving an object. It's you glance one day, you just glance and you see the circle on the floor and you think, oh, that's working beautifully.
Part you know what it is? That's the thing you've said so often, is you're often after the most obvious. It's just something that's obvious. And I think, like when you described seeing Fergus Martin in Hewing, that was a key, I think, experience for you that you often refer back to when you come back from Italy and this painting. I mean, it's so obvious, you just go from right to left, top to down, but there's something right or true or universal or something about, again, the square, the circle, but by the time you're finished with them, you've taken them somewhere else.
The thing about, I was thinking about the context of that Fergus Martin painting. I had, after our college, I had decided this is not for me, and that was due to a crash of confidence and faith. So I took myself off to Italy to live for a while. It ended up being 10 years. And one of my holidays back to Dublin, I went into the Hugh Lane Gallery, and I had never heard of Fergus Martin. And the reason I was thinking of it recently was because I can remember how my skin burned I had begun to paint again in my last 3 years living in Italy, and when I saw the Agnes Martin, it was like it was telling me, you have a reason to believe. It wasn't telling me what to do, but it was giving you, sometimes you look at things, it's probably why I look at the Giotto, and in fact my other books that I look at when I'm stuck are Fergus Martin, who for me has done it all. And again, you think this is a reason to pursue, to go on. It's like, I don't know whether it's a confidence thing, but it's like the spirit underneath you telling you to go on. And that moment in Hugh Lane, I have never ever forgotten. It actually also reminds me in a different way, going many, many more years back. This is a total digression. When I was at art school, my mother came home and she said, I have enough money to buy a coat for the winter, but I've just seen a painting in a gallery and I'd like you to see it. And she wasn't well off, she was bringing forward something of her own, and it was okay, but you know, she wasn't thinking really anything. And I went to the gallery, I've never forgotten this image either. We went to the gallery and it was a landscape, and I saw her face transform. And I still have that image in my head, and I remember thinking, you should be so lucky that this could happen, that a person could respond like this. And I think those moments are rare and exceptional, and very beautiful and very powerful. So that moment with the Hugh Lane Gallery and the Agnes Martin, and then I went over some years ago to London to the Agnes Martin show. One of those daft things you do where you think, I'd have the energy to stay all day, so you get the dawn flight and you get the last flight home. And of course by 4 o'clock you're dead, and you've got all that time to spend. I couldn't leave a painting called Leaf, which is basically one of her 6-foot square grids, rectangular grid. I remember thinking, you have to leave. But I had to wrench my feet off the floor to leave this painting, Leaf. And I say those moments are staggering, and I just feel it's not just luck, it's something almost divine hits us when these moments happen. And we all have our moments like that with different kinds of work, and it's a wonderful, lucky place to be, I think.
Fergus, could you tell us a bit about, we might give you more looks at the paintings up close, but tell us about how you type the soul and the struggle that you went through.
My soul was lying on my floor. These are beautiful plywood panels, and it was lying on my floor. That was on my wall because I made this piece, and I made another piece which we haven't shown, and I made that. I didn't make that. Lying on my floor, unprimed, unpainted, without the top section glued on. And I kept looking at it, and I kept growing fonder and fonder of it. And I kept saying to myself, you're kind of the beginning of all this, but I don't know what or how. And it also reminded me of Superman, because of his crest. And I love Superman. And loving Superman warmed me to that even more. And I'm always, you know when you buy a chicken in a tinfoil thing, I always put the tinfoil thing on my wall for some time because it's Superman's crest. And I have a collection of them. And that kept reminding me of Superman. And I thought, oh God, it's Superman. And I normally paint the size of everything. And in fact, sorry, I normally don't. You know what you mean? Right. And this, having painted the sides of smoke, I wanted to see what it would be like having the sides white, as they normally are in the square paintings. And it kept making me think of birds walking in snow, and that's why the title came. And one of the important things for me about this is the distance between the tragic and I just felt it was, it moved me in a way, in a kind of a delicate way, and that's the reason for that.
I just love how this new form can be used playfully, you know, to create just a different
It can be.
sensation each time.
It can be, and it sometimes you almost have so many of these forms cut out in different papers that it sometimes seems that you begin to know which ones work and which ones don't. And you think, oh, I've got thousands of ideas here. But when it comes down to the board, you think, not really. You know, I like to bring everything down, again, distilling, and also I like to, Stravinsky had a terrific quote about the more constrained he was, the freer he was. And that's exactly how I feel, physically and mentally. I just feel, in some ways, I think one of the souls of a lot of my painting here, but also before, is that it's so contained and rigid. But for me, if I feel it has the potential to explode, I'm happy. I always think these things have the potential to explode in your face. That can depend on its composition and its colour. And I also like the skin of the colour. Sometimes in these paintings, I think the skin of the paint on the white ground is like it's hanging on for its dear life. like Charlie Chaplin is hanging onto some skyscraper is about to fall off. That's what I often think of when I see it. So if it's working that way for me, I'm happy. And if it's not, I'm a bit bored.
It makes me think of the Road Runner suspended in midair.
Yes.
Or the coyote, I should say. The coyote suspended in midair,
Yes.
just held in suspension.
No,
When he's gone off yet another cliff.
I'll never be able to look at Arrest again now, Fergus.
I know you will. Arrest.
Tell us, I love I mean, it's so, you know, it's so, could be a road sign, but it's so not a road sign, you know.
Well, I gave it the title Arrest because when I saw it, I thought of French signpost, arrête. And I couldn't get that out of my head, so it just anglicized it to Arrest. I liked that though, I liked the title.
It does kind of stop you in your tracks a bit.
It's, to me, it's a very obvious thing to do with the painting.
Yeah.
And I was, again, when you see a thing that's so obvious it's staring you in the face, I find it utterly mysterious. I can't explain it, because it's there.
It's the there-ness.
And that's a that colour pulled up more to blue. The yellow is
Tell us what yellow.
I had made dozens of yellows in my studio, and I wasn't happy with any of them. And I went to Evan's art shop, and I saw a colour called lemon yellow. And I opened the tube and I said, oh God, there it is. But those moments in an art shop, you know, you're so happy. And but it's also the fruit of having tried it. I mean, and I love mixing colours. They have their recipes, and except I haven't done the recipe for that. Sometimes I have all my recipes on cards, like 3 tablespoons burnt umber, 8 tablespoons cobalt blue, 1 tablespoon matte medium. So I've all the recipes for the different degrees of them.
Yeah.
And twice it's happened with 2 paintings I've been very happy with. They were the last, it was the last colour in the wonderful big Tupperware bowls I use, and I hadn't written down the ingredients. So I just go back and find them and make them again. But I get frustrated that that's the one colour I should have kept track of. But we're being kicked out of our studios where we live work on Henrietta Street. And I was looking around at all the 30 years worth of stuff I have to deal with. And a question came to me. I thought, if somebody said if the building was on fire, what would you take first? And I realized it was my plastic Tupperware jugs. Because they are so safe. You get them at those kitchen-y shops. Big plastic Tupperware jugs, a bit like a robin's breast, you know, that kind of look. And they have a handle. And I hold a lot of paint. And then I cover them in plastics to keep them going. And it just feels like you have enough paint. And that, for me, is important and safe. So I'm busy now. And they also, for organization point of view, when they're not being used to hold wet paint, they hold all my tubes of dry paint. So there are the yellows, certain lemon yellows, certain blues. So a bit of office efficiency there helps.
So Someone said this was the kind of note of hope or something, I guess, maybe because with titles like War or Smoke, you know, maybe this show does reflect, maybe I feel,
my
the
mood
world
had
we're in
changed.
now. You know?
My mood had changed.
Yeah.
Again, this show is still an ongoing process because of all the hiccups we had.
Yeah.
And well, even if it hadn't been, you're always going on. My mood had changed. Physically, for me, that was very difficult to paint. But physically, you open up a new freedom. When the white paint is a nightmare to paint for me, and especially on a white wall. But thankfully, my walls are messy and dirty, so I can see. But sometimes I think I'm painting blind. I don't know what I'm doing, and I think, good, there's a bit of freedom for you, and it just opens up another little door, and it's very freeing. And that was a colour I didn't know what I was doing. The layers of paint for me have a process. The first layer, there's lots of exposed white because the brush has not filled everything. Second, and I get impatient when I see that first layer, so I'm going on to the next one. And the second layer fills it up a bit more because I'm deliberately a brush mark so I can layer alternatively for the number of coats I do. Third layer is what I call I don't know if any of you do this. Every time I get to the third layer of paint, I have a memory of being a child on the beach, and maybe you're making sand castles. But we used to do a thing where you'd make a mound of sand, and it was very wet, and you'd pat it. We would call them mud pies. You'd pat it, and it would sort of wobble. It would still be solid, but very wet. The third coat for me is the mud pie coat. I think, yes, the body has come into it. It's not fully there, but I think, thank God, the body has come into it. Then I'm on the road. I mean, you're on the road from the beginning, but I just feel happier when I've got to that stage, and then more and more coats until simply it's right. Simply it's that's especially true with the brown colours. But I love yellow. I love all colours. But I was so happy when I found this yellow. It's called lemon yellow, and I went back to my studio. But none of them are as good as I found.
Frank Stella said he wanted his paintings. Frank Stella said he wanted his paintings to be as good as it was on the can.
Oh, how wonderful! That's very true. Very true.
But I like people's comments. You know, Paul was here earlier in the show, and he was just saying how you make metal feel soft. You know, that's that. So you're very aware when you look closely at the paintings that they've been handmade. You know, they're.
I use a brush. It's called number 12. I only use a brush like that. When I began painting first, I was using rollers and I didn't like them, and so I was using the big brushes and I didn't like them. I like to be just like that. I think it's about an inch, and it just means you're always there, and I like that. And
Fergus, can I ask you just about the consistency of the paint? You were talking in fascinating terms about colour and the origins of colour for you, whether it's in the tube or the can or the world. But I'm just wondering about the consistency of paint and how that might change between different works. Say when you're using the yellow as opposed to the umber and blue mix, for example. Like, so is the consistency consistent? You know? Or is there, like I noticed, for example, on the painting, on the smoke painting, there's a sense that the paint itself is looser.
It is.
So I'm just curious then about the decision making maybe around that.
Yes. There's a few answers here. With that one in particular, I actually felt I could be painting signs. You know, I felt much more looser, and I felt there was more freedom in the fact that it was unbound, for example, by the tape on these, or just as an object. And I let rip a bit, and I felt like there's actually marks of gobs of paint on that. And when I saw them, I thought, oh, great. And whereas you could be painting in a gob of paint by then, you think, I don't want that one, you know. But I felt this was, it became freer for me.
Yeah.
And
Because the latter shape and the
well, I just
painting on it.
felt this is telling me you could be outside painting and hoarding. It was like that.
Yeah.
And it was a nice feeling. And sometimes it comes out of pure enjoyment of using the colour.
Yeah.
I've just finished a painting in the studio, the consistency of which I don't like. It's actually in that same colour. And I'm kind of thinking, it's because it's got too brush marking. And I'm never interested in dead flat surface. I'm just not interested in that at all. I like marks. And the marks in some of the paints and the consistency comes from the paint itself, the pigments, and you get a smoother mark, but there are marks there. And I certainly felt good that it's gone from that to that which has much more paintbrushy. If that's a good way to answer, I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's interesting the distinction between painting on a shape that has no boundaries other than the object itself and making a boundary within the object and how that impacts how you apply paint. That's really interesting.
Somebody told me, by the way, there's a streak of blue in one of the panels, which I hadn't noticed.
Oh yeah.
And I was delighted when I heard that. But it made me think of Irish tweed. That you have a grey tweed and suddenly it's a bit like an orchid in the burren, a blue. And I thought, oh great. But I didn't do it on purpose, you know. I like that freedom, but I do know that whereas I never want to totally, I think it's uninflected surface that just doesn't do anything for me. It can do in somebody else's work, but not for me. I mean, when I say that, I mean it can do it when I see somebody else's work. I think, oh, that's wonderful. But it doesn't do it for me painting. I like the marks, but there are grades of it. For example, this painting I'm talking about now has too many ridges from the brush. I don't like it. I mean, it's useful as a learning tool, but I'm going to have it sanded down and start again, you know. Yeah.
Thanks.
And obviously it's a different experience for Fergus paintings on a scale like that compared to Soul or the smaller quadriptychs.
It can matter, it can change things. One of the things, by the way, that surprised me was I thought, years and years ago I did some paintings that were multi-panel paintings, and I remember thinking, I don't want to ever do that again. Yeah. I just thought, no, I'm never doing it again. They made themselves by my shapes on the computer. I got very excited about it. And so it opened up that door again in a different way for me. Because it was a definite feeling of after the last time I painted a multi-panel painting, I thought it's like out of your system. It doesn't interest you anymore. But it came back because just of seeing them and seeing how they worked. I'm just looking at the painting over there called War. One of the things that was terribly exciting about this gallery was the pillar. Because the pillar for me confirmed the spears in the Paolo Uccello painting. They're on the march. And I remember the show texting Jerome, what size is that wall? One of them I have to go behind the pillar. So boy, when we put it up, I was cheering the pillar, you know. And loving that you have obstructions, things like that. But I see that as the marching soldiers very much, you know. This gallery is great for a goal for me of any exhibition. And this gallery, this installation has worked for me in this way, I hope it helps me. That there is the general view, the general atmosphere, the general impact of the whole exhibition. But you may turn a corner and there's just two paintings you see, or one painting, and one hopes that's satisfying or gives pleasure. But then when you come out of that, you're back in the bigger world of the entire installation. Yeah. I find, for me, hanging it was very exciting for that reason.
That's why you took them down. What was the reason?
Oh, we were just moving something. Oh no, something practical.
It was my desk.
Oh, it's his desk.
Oh, it's
Yes. Why are they doing that? I forgot this is new desk.
Sorry. And we were looking at the back, we were going, I shouldn't be giving too much information.
Oh, do.
But no, but just one was written on the back of one of them, so that it's just listed there.
Yes, I've numbered them all, but I forgot to number 3 of those. But we have our visual guide. But it was very interesting for me that we had it up, and then a few seconds later we realised that's wrong. I found that amusing, but I found it interesting because I thought it's like the magic at work here.
Is there any possibility that the painting wouldn't have a definitive, or that the group wouldn't have a definitive relationship, that potentially alternative arrangements are even valid?
They will and would be, because I've tried them all. I've tried some of them, and not only tried them in one horizontal line, but a square of them, 2 and 2. There are options that I would be very excited to see with both that and that. And in fact, I'd be very excited to do it. But it just means I'm just start doing more paintings now. But no, also making the small ones gives you scope to play with that, and it's very nice. It's quite interesting what can happen.
I can't help thinking that both of the paintings that consist of 4 component parts, that sure, you could make new paintings that explore new relationships, but you could also simply rearrange the existing painting,
completely, yeah.
by putting it into a different space or a different situation.
Absolutely.
So in a way, they're repeatable in variation as they are, but to make anything new.
That has lived different lives on my studio wall, and it can do again. Oh no, in fact, I mean the thing about making a painting is just great to make a painting. No, but most definitely the existing ones. Yeah. And actually, it teaches you things. You see different movements, different spaces. And I can't honestly explain why I ended up with this formation for this show, except that it satisfied my eyes. Some sense of rightness for me about it. One of the things that's kind of not in this show that was always important for me is the bottom line. It happens in maybe those 2 paintings. The bottom line of the bottom edge of every painting, when it's completely painted, is a feeling I love, because it's the feeling of, again, going back to one's childhood, it's the rain going down my mother's windscreen. And it always comes back to me every time I paint. When I get paint, when I get to the last line, I think, here's the rain. And it's always coming down, and that's been disrupted this time, because none of the paintings have an entire square left. And that, it didn't throw me, but I noticed it. And I got the feeling, painting that painting there, because there was a significant amount of bottom line. But it's not in it as much for me now. And
but the painting is always up. Is it always in vertical?
Yes,
direction.
Yes, and
Fergus, just when I came in and saw your works here, it sort of reminded me of atoms and molecules and basic building shapes. And I'm wondering if IMP in your studio was the ghost of Einstein creating a new physics from which we can build a new Earth, Fergus.
I'm sure it is. That's not lovely image. Actually, the thing about the imp is strange. I don't really feel that now, but I did feel it. It sounds like, nonsense, but I felt something was playing. In fact, I kept thinking the whole thing is a conundrum. And I had to work it out. And I haven't worked out yet.
Any other questions? It did strike me immediately when I saw smoke in particular, that the shapes feel like quotation marks or similar characters in the alphabet. And I just wonder, is that entirely incidental, or was there any thought of that?
That's terribly interesting, that question. Because another word that kept coming back to my mind is rebus. Rebus, is it? Which is, I don't know, is that, I don't know if it's that game or that quiz thing where you have a symbol and a letter. I know in rebus, when it comes to I'm going to repeat, there's Italian magazines or crossword puzzle books. There's a big thing is the rebus. And it's terribly interesting you asking about the alphabet, because I kept thinking when I was painting these two of these symbols, where you might have a word, I can't think of one now, but one of the letters which was, you might have an image of an eye, which stood for the letter I, and but you have a letter as well. And that kept coming into my head. So I'm terribly interested when you said that about alphabet, because for me this was a rebus, which was a confusing puzzle, a puzzle to undo. Which I have an example of it now, but I don't know if we do that here so much, but I think it's a game you get in newspapers with crossword puzzles. You know, I don't know, it's very popular in Italy, I know, in magazines and things. But that kept coming back to me, and I didn't know which part of the puzzle I was at, but it was a puzzle.
I think Rebus is also a Scottish detective. There's a new series of what's that? Rebus.
Rebus,
It's
that's
now a
the
Scottish detective, I think.
Oh, I don't know that.
Well, I think there's a
Well, you see, I'm
some
obsessed.
trailer for
I'm
Rebus.
obsessed. So, I don't watch as many things as I used to because my eyes get a bit bothered on certain screens, but I listen to Radio Echoes, which is a site with very old, mostly American, quite trashy detectives, and they are addictive. So anything to do with detectives, I didn't know the Rebus is a television one.
Yeah, it's a television.
Okay, that's my next song.
It's fairly trashy.
I'm fascinated by detective stories, but my favourite ones are to do with con artists. I absolutely love people being conned. And I love the solutions then, of getting out of it. And of course you wouldn't love it with your phone being hacked and all that kind of stuff. But I just love tricks. I love tricks. I just love it.
Second career.
Okay, good. I'm far too good. I get tricks. I'm so gullible, but I love them.
Thank you very much, Fergus.
That's very, yeah.
Great.
Thank you.